Hello, my name is Abhinav, and today I'll be talking about how African Americans influenced the Civil War. So basically, we know the Civil War was a huge battle, more Americans killed than in any other war. But the thing is, African Americans had a huge thing to do with the victory. The sheer amount might have been the factor that the X factor that allowed the North to win. So today we're going to discuss how slavery influenced the war, who were important political figures, and the importance of African Americans in the war. So how slavery influenced the war first? It divided the North and South. We all know that. Um, the North was more industrialized, so it didn't have slavery. The South was more agricultural, and had large plantations which needed slaves. So they supported slavery. Fugitive slave law passed earlier, and Missouri Compromise also made it worse. The South felt the Missouri Compromise broke their 10th Amendment rights to decide for themselves whether or not to allow slavery. The fugitive slave law enraged the North, and so was not enforced very well at all. If it ever was enforced, that is. A lot of towns didn't enforce it. A lot of towns didn't enforce it. So basically, what you have is two half-baked ideas, which are supposed to fix the Union, but instead just make it worse. So they kept going back and forth on slavery, and then Lincoln was elected president, and the South finally seceded. So Lincoln actually, when he issued the Emancipation Proclamation, it actually had no effect whatsoever, because the Emancipation Proclamation took place in the South, but the South's now supposedly a different country. So basically, I think most people speculate that he did that to improve relations with the public, because they were already on top of him for doing this and doing that, and without that, he probably would not have had those good relations with the public as he had with that. Then let's go to important political figures. So we have Frederick Douglass first, and we also have Harriet Tubman. We'll discuss about later. But right now, Frederick Douglass. He was born to a slave mother and a plantation owning father. He was a rebel as a slave, and was slave broke many times before he ran away. Um, when he ran away, he believed he could be a better speaker and writer than the abolitionist Caucasians who spoke on the African Americans' behalf. He believed he could be a better writer, and he became a national national and international sensation, whose views of slavery were brought to the world. He went as far as England to discuss his views with other people. Then we have Harriet Tubman, who was more of a local person. Her nickname was actually Moses, because, as a lot of you know, she freed slaves. She was a former slave herself, like Douglass, who escaped into freedom. She made 13 trips into the South, freeing over 300 slaves. People called her Moses, as I said before, because she freed so many slaves. And she lived a long time to talk about it, too. So now let's talk about how the African Americans influenced the war as an army. So originally, African Americans could not serve in the army, only in the Navy. However, in 1862, a law was passed allowing the army to have African Americans in them. This was the Militia Act of 1862. Their most famous regiment is the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, who fought at Fort Wagner. And let's start about where they came from. So they were from Massachusetts, as I said before. The governor of Massachusetts decided to organize one of these. He put his young Colonel Robert Shaw in charge of in charge of what he called a colored regiment, which of course, as we know, is the African American Regiment. Basically, this revolutionized how we thought of the African Americans serving in the army, because he wantingly enlisted them, and they were proven to be very good fighters. Uh, the Battle of Fort Wagner, they might have been they might have been part of the reason that the Union won in the Second Battle of Fort Wagner, because they spearheaded an attack charge. Although over half of them, including Colonel Shaw, lost their lives, they still continue to inspire us today. They basically revolutionized what people thought, because people never thought before, oh, African Americans, they might be like they might be like helpers or something. They can't actually win a battle. But now they figured out, oh wow, they can. Yeah, the African American soldiers also fought for equal pay, and that's a later thing. That's one of the more things that relate to civil rights. But this battle completely changed. This battle completely changed how people thought of how African Americans, what they can do. That this was basically when African Americans said, "I can do this. I can do whatever. You give me it, I'll do it." So, but now let's talk about the South's controversial decision to accept blacks into the army, African Americans into the army. So let's start with this. General Robert E. Lee hated slavery. He just did. He was torn between choosing the North, because he didn't like slavery, and his home state of Virginia. But his home state of Virginia was in the South, so he chose the South. He proposed that slaves they can make slaves go into the army, and they'll be free after the war. But adamantly, the South said no. Later, however, out of desperation, they finally said yes to that idea, and then But the problem with that was, it was far too late, and there are far too few number of African Americans who would serve in that army. So basically, most of them didn't want to serve, A, or B, they just did not. There were just not enough numbers for them to serve. So this is one of the main reasons African Americans serving in the army is one of the main reasons the Civil War went to the North. The Civil War was won by the North. It was a terrible conflict. More, as I said before, more humans killed than in any other war in USA history. And again, the sheer amount of slaves that who wanted the North to win due to hatred towards the South. Also, there were free African Americans too who fought for the North, who were already in the North. So that also adds an extra boost to them. However, even after the Civil War was over, it took decades before African Americans were able to get equal rights. This battle, the 54th Regiment and the Civil War were just a tiny step in the direction of equal freedom for everyone. The African Americans fought segregation for years to come, inspiring Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech, and that speech basically caused African Americans to have equality. That was when African Americans actually had equality. Until then, this was the first step. Okay, so thank you for watching on how the African Americans influenced the Civil War. Bye.